Hey guys, hope you're well. So what I thought I'd do today is explain why I moved to Singapore. Quite a few people have asked me that question over the years. I'm well known in Dubai these days because I've been here a long time. But what I also have done is lived in Singapore for almost 4 years. And often when I'm in front of customers or talking to some of my coaching clients, I'm asked the question why I moved to Singapore. And I thought I'd just tell the story, get it clear to you, and also tell you what I enjoyed about Singapore, what I didn't so much enjoy, and where I see the Singapore market now. So just to give some context, everyone, my name is Justin. I run MCG Talent. We are a recruitment business that operate in the Middle East and Asia. I also have a coaching program where I teach recruitment entrepreneurs how to build a 7-figure business. I have 14 years of being an entrepreneur experience under my belt, and have 20 plus years of work experience, having started work in the communications world. So I'd like to think I kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm always learning. Anyway, here's a little story about why I moved to Singapore. We set up the business in Dubai in 2010. Things were going really, really well. We grew the business successfully. In those days, we didn't really have another market in the East that we were competing against in the Middle East. We only had Hong Kong and Singapore that we were competing against when it came to candidates. So often when I was, say, reaching out to someone in London, they would say, yeah, I think I'll consider Dubai, but I'd also like to go to Hong Kong and also like to go to Singapore. And we kept competing with international talent that wanted to move East when we were in Dubai with Hong Kong and Singapore. And quite often in those days, particularly from about 2010 to 2017, we were losing, we were missing out. People thought Hong Kong and Singapore were the place to go. So it was sort of a bit, if you can't beat them, join them attitude I had. And I decided to, in 2016, decided to open up our first international venture into the East. And we went for Hong Kong as our first base in Asia. And it worked. You know, Adam, my business partner, went out there, went very well. Adam picked up a lot of the similar clients that we had in Dubai across advertising, across creative, communications, marketing and digital. A lot of the big multinationals that we've met working with the Middle East, Adam managed to get working with them in Hong Kong, as well as a big sort of pool of local clients as well. So anyway, from 16 to 18, business was going pretty well. We were about 5 or 6 people in Hong Kong. And what we were noticing was that from our P&L was that about 40% of our revenue was starting to come from Southeast Asia. Hong Kong and Singapore have always battled to be which is going to be the greater hub. And I think as the Chinification of Hong Kong has happened, more businesses have kind of felt that the climate in Singapore might be more appealing to them. Also, the Southeast Asia pool is, you know, obviously you've got Indonesia, you've got Malaysia, you've got Philippines, these really sort of big, powerful countries there now, and emerging nations, Vietnam, that Singapore was starting to play an ever more increasingly popular role and become more of a hub. So in that time, the Middle East market, since we opened in Asia, decided to have a bit of fun and crash. Well, it crashed slowly. The oil price tanked, as I've said in another video, and the market became quite flat in the Middle East. And well, to be honest with you, Mrs. Maguire and I still felt that we had another adventure in us, and we wanted to, having moved to London and moved to Dubai, we thought Asia looked really interesting. So with 2 small babies, we decided to move to Singapore and build MCG's client database and client portfolio within Southeast Asia. I moved over with a couple of other individuals from the Dubai office, and we went for it when we were in Singapore. We grew the business to around 10 people, and we really did replicate in terms of the types of businesses that we work with in Dubai: agencies, corporates, governments, technology companies. We worked with all of them in Singapore. But the interesting thing that we found about Singapore was, firstly, in Dubai, we were very used to sort of being able to move people from all over the world into Dubai. In Singapore, that isn't really the case. In Singapore, they have an employment pass system. So you're either Singaporean, you're a permanent resident, or you have an employment pass system. Now, to be a foreigner, to work in there, you have to go through the employment pass system. So it's quite hard to break into that because each business has its own quota of the amount of employment passes they are allowed to get. And in order to get an employment pass, you also need to prove that a local in Singapore cannot do the job. Now, That therefore means that it's not as fluid when it comes to expats moving into a market as it is in, say, Dubai, where you can very easily get a visa. So we were working with a much more localized market in Singapore. We were working with people that were already based within the island, and really most Singapore businesses, be those multinational, local or SMEs, wanted Singaporeans. And whilst there is quite a number of Singaporeans to go around, there's also a number of businesses. And so competition for talent, Singaporean talent, was fierce. It was driving up salaries. Digital skills were in quite high demand. And certainly if you wanted niche skill sets in technology, etc., it was actually very hard to find Singaporeans. And it was also very expensive to hire them. So that was one of the biggest things I noticed. The difference between Dubai market was the Singapore market was incredibly localized. And the length of time it takes to bring foreigners on with the employment pass system meant that you could do a great job as a recruiter. You could find a perfect candidate. The client would then want to hire them. They then put someone through the visa process, and then whoa, that visa might not get allowed. So all that work you've done as a recruiter, particularly if you've got contingent terms, can be turned to dust, which was very frustrating. The other thing we got to understand about the Singapore market, it's extremely highly regulated. So setting up there, you need to prove really that you are a good business. If you're an international business, if you want to set up a branch there, you need to prove that you've got a track record. You need to prove that you've got money in the bank. You need to drop quite a lot of money into Singapore to open up a business there. And you really need a local key account holder. So you need a Singaporean as a signatory to have your business there as well. So it is really sort of focused on only successful businesses opening up there, and that they want Singaporeans involved as key account holders of that business. The other thing that a lot of people might find quite surprising, it's very regulated, the recruitment market. You can get two types of licenses. You can get one where you literally where you're allowed to recruit anyone at any level on a permanent or contract basis. In order to be able to recruit, you actually need to take an exam. Yep, that's right. Recruiters need to take a recruitment exam. That was one type of license you can get. Then the other license you can get is what we had, where anyone above 3,000, I believe it's 3,000 Singapore dollars, it could be 2,500 or 3,000 Singapore dollars. Anyone on a salary above that, you get a separate license where you don't have to take an exam, but you are very, very regulated. So every quarter, we need to submit to the Ministry of Manpower who our placements are. They then will review those placements, see that they abide to our license laws, and then they could, if they wanted, call up those candidates or those clients that we've placed with and check to see if we've done a good job with them. So the market is incredibly regulated. At the end of the year, your accounts are audited. Everything has to be checked to make sure that you're a successful business running in Singapore. So I'm not going to go into any more details there, but if you drop me a message, I can give you a few more bits and pieces about the intricacies of setting up a business and the regulations of it. The thing I want to also add to this now is it's quite expensive to have a business in Singapore. The Singapore market, look, Singapore is an island. I don't think many people realize it. It's actually a very small island. It's the size of the Isle of Wight in comparison, really, which is the small island at the bottom of the UK. It is an island that, by its very nature, is used to international travelers coming in. It's a hub, it's a global hub, but it's also a tourist hotspot. But because it's so small, property there is really worth gold, worth its weight in gold. Everyone wants to live in a nice condo, which is what they call apartments there. And if you've got families like we had living there, you have to live in a house, or you choose to live in a house. That can be very expensive. The landlords can put the rent up if the market's doing really, really well, or if you're lucky, the rents can go down. But rent really is very expensive in Singapore. When I was living in Singapore, it was often number one or number two as the most expensive places in the world to live. Going out is expensive. Alcoholic drinks, ludicrously expensive. Very nice plush restaurants there, but extremely expensive. Taxis are expensive. Driving. If you want to own a car there, you have to buy a certificate of entitlement that enables you to drive. Then if you want to buy a car, you could be looking at about $100,000, and I'm talking US dollars, for a crappy car, really. And cars on the island don't really last longer than 10 years old. So if you're going to get a car, you probably are going to do it if you've got a family. What we did to get around some of these rules is we rented a car, but you had to take a driving test after 1 year of being there. To keep that in mind, you couldn't just rent a car on your UK or international driving license. So really, if you've got a family, you need to drive, you're going to be sort of navigated down quite an expensive path. The flip side of that, I'll say, is that the public transport system there is unreal. The tube network, or the MRT there is, or MTR, I can't remember, it's Hong Kong and Singapore have, it sounds very similar. Anyway, the train tube network there is fantastic, gets you across the island super fast. Taxi network there is pretty good as well, and because the island isn't that big, it never really takes that long to get around in a taxi. Traffic at times can be bad, but on the whole, it's not really that bad. But the island itself, it's clean, it's well run, everything in Singapore works. It's a fantastic place, it's a fantastic, efficient place in that part. Networking in Singapore is amazing. The business climate there is brilliant. You've got huge brands like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Google, Amazon, you name it, having huge, big entities set up there. And they've got them there because they really like the way Singapore is regulated. They like its role as a hub for the region. And because the island is so small, actually it's quite easy to network there. And I was there, lucky old me, during COVID. Now, COVID was a very tough time to be in Asia. It was a highly regulated market when it came to mask wearing. It came to following the rules. I think Singapore loves rules, although all the rules and how you should behave and everything came into play there, so we all had to abide by them. But the one plus point I would say about being there during COVID was that when you went to a restaurant, when you went to a networking event which was following all COVID rules, you were quite often mixing with some really interesting international people who were very powerful because they weren't leaving Singapore like you, so it really was very easy to network with them. Even still today, post-COVID, lots of opportunities to network with great people there, lots of high net worth individuals, lots of really successful entrepreneurs, lots of very powerful CEOs there. So if you're good at networking, which every successful entrepreneur should be, you can really start to get a name for yourself. In terms of the economy itself, from our business perspective, I found it was really connected to the financial services system. There was a tremendous tech ecosystem. There was a huge media and ad tech environment there, and that was growing. It was very, a lot of the markets in Asia Pacific are really connected to the success of China. So the market right now in Singapore is a little bit tough because China's slowed down. But once that starts revving its engines again, you'll find that Singapore will be flying. Financial services sector there is growing and growing. You'll find that Hong Kong and Singapore continuously battle for talent, but most businesses want to be in Asia. The APAC region is 3 billion people, and Singapore seems to be serving as a real hub, and the preferred choice right now, really, to serve the APAC market. Mrs. Maguire and I had a really enjoyable close to 4 years there. Our third child was born there. The healthcare system was tremendous. It's quite expensive when it is compared to Dubai. It's probably behind the USA, one of the more expensive markets, but I must say the standard is tremendous. The medical care is great. So we enjoyed our time there. Fortunately, COVID was a bit annoying. We didn't really get to travel and see the rest of the region. One of the great things about living in Singapore is you are so close to Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, all these amazing, beautiful places that you can go and visit. Also, these really up-and-coming economies that you can go and visit for business as well. Vietnam, absolutely flying. Malaysia, very interesting market. Lots going on in KL. Manila, used as a big outsourcing hub, but also a burgeoning tech hub. Ho Chi Minh City, a big tech hub burgeoning as well. Jakarta, I think Indonesia, people don't realize, nearly 300 million people are there. Huge burgeoning economy, set to be one of the largest in the world. So Singapore is close to all these massive, wonderful, interesting places. And we didn't get really to take advantage as much of that because of COVID. We did for like a year and a half, and then the shutters came down, but still now with the business there, we get to take advantage of that. So I love Singapore. I think there's great potential for it. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think our business there will continue to prosper. I think businesses will continue to want to open up there. I think if you're serious about making an inroad into Asia, if you're serious about opening up a business in Asia, Singapore needs to be part of what you're doing. I think though, once you get there and scratch the surface, it's not as easy as most people think. It is very expensive. And if you're going to go into Asia, you need to make a big investment. But so far, it's not one that we've regretted. And I had a thoroughly enjoyable time in Asia. And I will say the food in Singapore is absolutely delicious.